Captain Maria Santos had always been different from other soldiers. While her fellow officers complained about the heat, the sand, and the endless patrols in the desert region of Kandahar province, she found purpose in every mission. Her dark eyes held a determination that had carried her through 12 years of military service, from a young recruit from Texas to one of the most respected intelligence officers in the 82nd Airborne Division. The morning sun cast long shadows across the forward operating base as Maria checked her equipment one final time. Her unit, Bravo Company, had been tasked with a reconnaissance mission deep into enemy territory. Intelligence reports suggested that insurgent forces had established a new supply route through the mountain passes, and command needed eyes on the ground to confirm the threat level. Maria's second-in-command, Lieutenant Jake Morrison, approached with the final briefing materials. Jake was a good soldier, young and eager, but he lacked the experience that came with years of combat operations. His blonde hair was already damp with sweat despite the early hour, and Maria could see the nervousness in his green eyes. "Captain, the satellite imagery shows increased activity in Sector 7, Jake reported, handing her a tablet with the reconnaissance photos. Command estimates 30 to 40 hostiles in the area. Maria studied the images carefully. Something felt wrong about the intelligence report. The positioning of the enemy forces seemed too organized, too deliberate for a simple supply operation. Her instincts, honed by years of combat experience, told her this mission carried more risk than command had calculated. "What about air support?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Negative, Captain. All air assets are committed to Operation Desert Shield in the northern sector. We're on our own for this one." The weight of responsibility settled on Maria's shoulders like an old, familiar coat. She had led Bravo Company through 17 successful missions without losing a single soldier. Her men trusted her judgment completely, and she had never let them down. But this mission felt different somehow, like walking into a trap that hadn't been set yet. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, her most experienced non-commissioned officer, joined them at the planning table. Rodriguez had served with Maria for over 4 years and could read her moods better than anyone. His weathered face showed concern as he looked at the mission parameters. "Captain, my gut's telling me something's off about this one," Rodriguez said quietly, voicing what Maria had been thinking. "Mine too, Sergeant. But we have our orders." Maria folded the tablet and secured it in her tactical vest. "Brief the squad leaders. We move out in 20 minutes. As her soldiers prepared for the mission, Maria walked the perimeter of the base, checking defensive positions and equipment. The base itself was a small outpost, home to roughly 200 personnel from various units. Most were support staff, logistics specialists, and communications experts. Only Bravo Company was designated for combat operations in this sector. The communications officer, Specialist Williams, flagged Maria down as she completed her inspection. Williams was a tech specialist from California, barely 22 years old but brilliant with electronic systems. His usual calm demeanor seemed strained as he approached with a secure radio handset. "Captain Santos, I've got General Patterson on the line for you. Priority communication." Maria took the handset, stepping away from the other soldiers for privacy. General Patterson was her commanding officer, a career military man with 30 years of service and a reputation for straight talk. "Santos, I need to brief you on some additional intelligence that just came in." The general's voice crackled through the static. "Our sources indicate possible chemical weapons in your target area. This changes the mission parameters significantly." Maria felt her stomach tighten. Chemical weapons represented a threat level far beyond what her unit was equipped to handle. Bravo Company was trained for conventional warfare, not chemical or biological threats. "Sir, my unit doesn't have full chemical protection gear. We have standard gas masks, but nothing for extended exposure," Maria replied. "Understood, Captain. That's why I'm modifying your orders. Complete the reconnaissance, but maintain a safe distance. No direct engagement. Get the intelligence and get out. Roger that, General. One more thing, Santos. I know your record and I know your instincts. Trust them on this one. If something doesn't feel right, abort the mission and return to base immediately. The General's words carried an unusual weight of concern that Maria had never heard before. In all her years of service, General Patterson had been known for pushing missions forward regardless of risk. His advice to abort if necessary suggested he knew more about the threat than he was sharing. Maria gathered her squad leaders for a final briefing. Besides Lieutenant Morrison and Sergeant Rodriguez, the group included Staff Sergeant Chen, an explosives expert from Hawaii, and Sergeant Williams, a medic from Ohio. These 4 men had served with Maria through some of the most dangerous missions in the theater, and she trusted each of them completely. "Listen up," Maria began, spreading a map on the hood of a military vehicle. "We've received additional intelligence about possible chemical weapons in the target area. This changes everything about how we approach this mission." The squad leaders exchanged glances. Chemical weapons represented every soldier's nightmare, an invisible enemy that could kill without warning or mercy. "What's the new protocol, Captain?" asked Staff Sergeant Chen. "Maintain maximum distance for observation. No direct engagement under any circumstances. We get the intelligence photos and return immediately. If anyone even suspects chemical contamination, we abort and extract." The mission began as planned. Bravo Company moved out in 2 modified Humvees, taking a circuitous route through the desert to avoid known enemy positions. Maria rode in the lead vehicle with Morrison and Rodriguez, while Chen led the second vehicle with the rest of the squad. The journey to the target area took 3 hours through rough terrain. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, with rocky outcroppings and deep ravines that provided both cover and potential ambush points. Maria constantly scanned the horizon through binoculars, watching for any signs of enemy activity. As they approached the target coordinates, Maria called for a halt. Through her field glasses, she could see the enemy position clearly for the first time. What she observed made her blood run cold. The intelligence reports had been completely wrong about the nature of the threat. Instead of a simple supply operation, she was looking at a sophisticated military installation. Concrete bunkers, communication arrays, and what appeared to be a mobile missile launcher were visible in the valley below. This wasn't a supply route. It was a forward operating base for a major enemy offensive. "Rodriguez, take a look at this," Maria whispered, handing him the binoculars. The sergeant studied the enemy position for several minutes before lowering the glasses. His expression confirmed Maria's worst fears. "Captain, that's not a supply operation. That's a staging area for a major attack. Look at those bunkers and the communication equipment. This is a command and control center." Maria took back the binoculars and continued her observation. As she watched, she noticed something that made her heart race. Personnel in full chemical protection suits were moving between the bunkers, carrying what appeared to be specialized containers. "Chemical weapons?" she breathed. "They're not just storing them, they're actively preparing them for deployment." The implications hit her like a physical blow. If the enemy was preparing chemical weapons for an attack, the target could be any number of American or Allied positions in the region. Her own base, with its limited defensive capabilities, would be completely vulnerable to such an attack. Maria immediately reached for her radio to contact command. As she keyed the microphone, an explosion erupted from the enemy position below. Alarms began sounding from the bunkers, and Maria realized that their presence had been detected. "All units, this is Bravo 6. We've been compromised. Prepare for immediate extraction," Maria ordered. Before her soldiers could respond, enemy fire began impacting around their position. Maria and her team took cover behind the rocky outcropping, but she could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions in the valley below. The enemy had them surrounded and outnumbered. "Captain, we've got contacts to the east and south," reported Chen over the radio. They're trying to cut off our escape route. Maria assessed their situation quickly. The enemy had superior numbers and positions, but her team had better training and equipment. More importantly, they had the high ground and the motivation that came with protecting their fellow soldiers. Rodriguez, set up overwatch with the sniper rifle. Morrison, coordinate suppressive fire with Chen's team. We're going to fight our way out of here, Maria commanded. The firefight lasted for nearly an hour. Maria's soldiers fought with precision and determination, but the enemy continued to press their attack. Ammunition was running low, and several of her men had sustained minor injuries. During a brief lull in the fighting, Maria's radio crackled with an incoming transmission from Base Command. Bravo 6, this is Eagle Base. What's your status? Eagle Base, we're engaged with a large enemy force. We've discovered a major chemical weapons facility, not the supply route reported in intelligence. This is a significant threat to all friendly positions in the area, Maria reported. Copy that, Bravo 6. General Patterson wants to speak with you immediately. The general's voice came through clearly despite the ongoing battle. Santos, I need you to listen carefully. New intelligence indicates that the enemy is planning a major chemical attack within the next 24 hours. Your discovery confirms our worst fears. Sir, my unit can provide targeting data for an airstrike on this position, Maria replied, ducking as enemy fire struck near her position. Negative, Captain. I'm ordering you to extract immediately. We're pulling all units back to secure positions. A convoy will be waiting at Extraction Point Alpha in 2 hours. Maria felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Sir, respectfully, if we withdraw now, the enemy will have time to relocate their chemical weapons. This might be our only chance to prevent a major attack. Captain Santos, you have your orders. Extract immediately. That's not a request. It's a direct command. The transmission ended, leaving Maria to face an impossible decision. Her orders were clear: withdraw immediately and avoid further engagement. But her professional judgment told her that abandoning this position would result in countless American casualties when the enemy launched their chemical attack. As enemy fire continued to impact around her position, Maria made the decision that would define her entire military career. She would follow orders and extract her unit, but she would also find a way to prevent the chemical weapons attack from succeeding. The extraction took place under heavy fire, but Maria's training and leadership got all of her soldiers out alive. As they reached the rally point, she could see the convoy of vehicles waiting to transport them back to base. The convoy commander, Major Stevens, greeted Maria with obvious relief. Captain Santos, General Patterson wants your unit back at base immediately. We have orders to evacuate all personnel from this sector within 6 hours. Major, did Command brief you on what we discovered out there? Maria asked. I know there's a chemical threat, Captain. That's why we're pulling everyone back to secure positions. As the convoy began its journey back to base, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. The enemy now knew that their position had been discovered, and they would accelerate their timeline for the chemical attack. By the time American forces could organize a proper response, it would be too late. Back at the base, Maria was immediately summoned to a secure briefing room where General Patterson was waiting via video conference. The general's expression was grim as he began the debriefing. Captain Santos, your report confirms our intelligence about an imminent chemical attack. We're evacuating all personnel from forward positions and consolidating our forces at more secure locations. General, with respect, evacuation might be exactly what the enemy wants. If we withdraw, they'll have a clear path for their attack, Maria argued. Captain, you're a fine officer, but you're not seeing the bigger picture here. Intelligence suggests this is just one of several chemical weapons facilities. We need to protect our forces while we develop a comprehensive response strategy. Sir, what about the chemical weapons we observed? Are we planning an immediate airstrike on that position? General Patterson's pause told Maria everything she needed to know. Weather conditions and other operational priorities make an immediate airstrike unfeasible. We're looking at a minimum 48-hour delay. 48 hours, sir? The enemy could launch their attack by then. Captain Santos, you've done excellent work. Now I need you to follow orders. Your unit is being transferred back to Germany for reassignment. You leave on the next transport. Maria felt the weight of the general's words. She was being sent home, removed from the theater of operations just when her experience and knowledge were most needed. The official reason would be reassignment, but she understood the real message. Her objections to the withdrawal strategy were not welcome. As the briefing ended, Maria realized that she faced the most difficult decision of her military career. She could follow orders, return to Germany, and hope that command strategy would prevent the chemical weapons attack. Or she could find a way to stay and use her knowledge of the enemy position to prevent a disaster. The transport aircraft was scheduled to depart in 12 hours. Maria had until then to decide whether to obey her orders or follow her conscience. Either choice would change her life forever, but only one choice might save the lives of her fellow soldiers who remained in harm's way. As she walked through the base that evening, Maria observed the frantic preparations for evacuation. Soldiers were packing equipment, destroying sensitive materials, and preparing to abandon positions that had been hard-won through months of dangerous operations. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the uncertainty that comes when experienced soldiers are asked to retreat from an enemy they know they could defeat. Lieutenant Morrison found Maria near the communications center, where she had been monitoring radio traffic from other units in the sector. "Captain, the men are asking questions about the evacuation. They want to know why we're pulling back when we had the enemy position identified," Morrison said. Maria looked at the young officer, seeing her own doubts reflected in his eyes. "Jake, sometimes the hardest part of command is following orders when every instinct tells you they're wrong. But what about all those soldiers in the forward positions? If there really is a chemical attack coming, won't the evacuation leave them exposed?" It was the question Maria had been avoiding, the one that kept her awake despite her exhaustion. The evacuation was designed to protect the main force, but it would leave smaller outposts and patrol units vulnerable to the very attack they were trying to avoid. "Captain, I've been thinking about what we saw out there," Morrison continued. "That missile launcher looked like it had the range to hit targets 50 kilometers away. The evacuation won't take most units far enough back to be safe." Maria realized that Morrison had reached the same conclusion she had been fighting to avoid. The evacuation strategy was flawed, based on incomplete intelligence about the enemy's capabilities. Hundreds of American soldiers would remain within range of the chemical weapons attack. As the hours passed and the transport departure time approached, Maria found herself facing a choice that would define not just her career, but her entire sense of duty and honor. She could follow orders and hope that her superiors were right, or she could trust her experience and find a way to prevent a disaster that no one else seemed willing to acknowledge. Maria Santos stood in the empty barracks at 200 hours, her transport to Germany scheduled to depart in just 4 hours. Around her, the base continued its evacuation procedures, with soldiers loading equipment and preparing to abandon their positions. The weight of her decision pressed down on her like a physical force, but she knew what she had to do. Instead of packing her personal gear for the flight home, Maria was studying detailed maps of the region, plotting distances and calculating timelines. Her laptop displayed intercepted radio communications that Specialist Williams had quietly shared with her before the communications unit shut down their monitoring equipment. The intercepted messages were in broken English and local dialect, but Maria's years of intelligence work had given her enough language skills to understand the basic content. What she learned made her blood run cold. The enemy wasn't just planning a chemical weapons attack. They had acquired a tactical nuclear device. The conversations referenced a special weapon with a delivery timeline that coincided exactly with the American evacuation. The enemy had planned this perfectly, waiting until U.S. forces were concentrated in evacuation convoys before unleashing a weapon that could kill thousands of soldiers in a single strike. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she cross-referenced the enemy communications with the evacuation routes. The main convoy, carrying nearly 800 soldiers from various units, would pass directly through the predicted strike zone at exactly the time the enemy planned to deploy their weapon. She reached for her secure phone and dialed General Patterson's emergency number. After several rings, the general's aide answered. "This is Captain Santos. I need to speak with General Patterson immediately. It's a matter of life and death." "Captain, the general is in a classified briefing. He cannot be disturbed." "Listen to me carefully. I have intercepted enemy communications indicating they possess a tactical nuclear weapon. The evacuation convoy is heading directly into a nuclear strike zone. You need to get me through to the general right now." There was a pause before the aide responded. "Captain, I'm going to transfer you to the duty officer. Stand by." Maria waited impatiently as the call was transferred, knowing that every minute of delay brought the convoy closer to disaster. When the duty officer came on the line, she could hear the skepticism in his voice. "Captain Santos, this is Colonel Harris. I understand you have concerns about enemy capabilities, but our intelligence indicates no nuclear threat in this theater. Sir, I have direct intercepts of enemy communications. They're planning to detonate a tactical nuclear device along the evacuation route. The convoy needs to be diverted immediately." "Captain, you're supposed to be on a transport to Germany. What are you doing monitoring communications?" Maria realized that her credibility was being questioned because she had remained at the base instead of following her evacuation orders. In the military bureaucracy, disobedience often invalidated otherwise valid intelligence. "Colonel, regardless of my current status, the intelligence is legitimate. I'm requesting that you verify these intercepts through official channels and warn the convoy." "Captain Santos, report to the transport immediately. That's a direct order. Any further delays will result in formal disciplinary action." The line went dead, leaving Maria alone with the terrible knowledge that hundreds of soldiers were heading toward their deaths and no one in command would listen to her warnings. She looked at her watch. 3 hours until her transport departed, 5 hours until the convoy reached the strike zone. Maria made her decision. She would not board the transport to Germany. Instead, she would find a way to warn the convoy herself and, if necessary, prevent the nuclear attack through direct action. The first challenge was transportation. All official vehicles were either evacuating with their units or secured for the base shutdown. Maria would need to find an unofficial way to reach the convoy or intercept the enemy before they could deploy their weapon. Sergeant Rodriguez appeared in the doorway of the barracks, carrying a military backpack and wearing a grim expression. Behind him stood Lieutenant Morrison, Staff Sergeant Chen, and Sergeant Williams. All 4 men were supposed to be on the same transport to Germany, but none of them appeared ready to leave. "Captain, we've been monitoring the same communications you have," Rodriguez said quietly. "We know about the nuclear threat." Morrison stepped forward, his young face showing a determination that Maria had never seen before. "Captain, we've discussed this among ourselves. We can't leave knowing that our fellow soldiers are walking into a nuclear attack. Men, I appreciate your loyalty, but I can't ask you to disobey direct orders. This is my decision to make," Maria replied. Chen spoke up from the back of the group. "With respect, Captain, this isn't about orders anymore. This is about doing what's right. We've served together for years, and we trust your judgment more than we trust command." Williams, the medic, nodded in agreement. "Captain, we've got medical supplies, explosives, and communications equipment. If there's any chance we can save those soldiers, we have to try." Maria looked at each of her men, understanding the magnitude of what they were offering. By staying behind and joining her unauthorized mission, they were risking court-martial, imprisonment, and the end of their military careers. Yet each of them was willing to sacrifice their futures for the chance to save their fellow soldiers. "If we do this, there's no going back," Maria warned them. "Command will consider us deserters. Our careers will be over and we'll face serious legal consequences." "Captain, some things are more important than careers," Rodriguez replied. "We didn't join the military to abandon our fellow soldiers when they needed us most." Maria felt a surge of pride and gratitude for these men who had chosen to follow her into an impossible situation. She also felt the crushing weight of responsibility for their lives and futures. "All right, then we do this together, but we do it smart, and we do it by the book as much as possible. Our mission is to prevent the nuclear attack and save the convoy. Everything else is secondary." The team spent the next hour planning their unauthorized mission. Williams had managed to acquire detailed intelligence on the enemy position, including guard rotations and defensive positions. Chen had identified the most likely location for the nuclear device based on the enemy communications and the layout of their facility. Morrison had found them transportation, a military utility vehicle that had been left behind due to mechanical problems. Chen's expertise with engines would allow him to repair the vehicle and get them to the enemy position. The vehicle wasn't ideal for combat operations, but it would get them where they needed to go. Rodriguez had gathered weapons and ammunition from the base armory, technically borrowing equipment that was scheduled for evacuation anyway. Each team member would carry a primary weapon, sidearm, and enough ammunition for an extended firefight. As they prepared to leave, Maria recorded a detailed message explaining their actions and the intelligence that had prompted their decision. She addressed the recording to General Patterson, knowing it might be the last communication she would ever send to her commanding officer. "General, by the time you receive this message, my team and I will be en route to prevent a nuclear attack on the evacuation convoy. I understand that our actions constitute a direct violation of orders, but the intelligence we've gathered indicates that hundreds of American soldiers will die if we don't act. I accept full responsibility for this decision and the actions of my men. Captain Maria Santos." Signing off. She secured the recording in the base communication system with instructions to deliver it to General Patterson if they failed to return within 12 hours. The journey to the enemy position took them across 60 kilometers of hostile territory. Maria's team traveled without radio communication to avoid detection, navigating by GPS and landmark references. The utility vehicle performed better than expected, with Chen's repairs holding up despite the rough terrain. As they approached the enemy facility, Maria could see that the situation had changed significantly since their reconnaissance mission the previous day. The number of enemy personnel had doubled, and new defensive positions had been constructed around the perimeter. Most ominously, a large vehicle covered by camouflage netting had been positioned near the center of the compound. Using high-powered binoculars, Williams was able to confirm their worst fears. "Captain, that covered vehicle matches the profile for a mobile nuclear launcher. If that's what I think it is, it has the range to hit the convoy anywhere along the evacuation route." Maria studied the enemy position, calculating angles of attack and defensive capabilities. The compound was heavily fortified, with multiple machine gun positions and what appeared to be anti-aircraft weapons. A direct assault by 5 soldiers would be suicide, but they had advantages that the enemy couldn't anticipate. "Chen, what would it take to disable that launcher without detonating the nuclear device?" Maria asked. The explosives expert considered the question carefully. "If we could get close enough to plant charges on the launcher's mobility systems, we could prevent them from moving it into firing position. The trick would be getting past their security perimeter." Rodriguez pointed to a drainage canal that ran along the eastern edge of the compound. "Captain, that canal might give us a covered approach. If we could time it right with their guard rotations, we might be able to penetrate their perimeter undetected." Maria knew that the plan was extremely dangerous, with minimal chance of success and almost no possibility of escape. but the alternative was allowing hundreds of American soldiers to die in a nuclear attack that only her team could prevent. "Williams, monitor enemy communications. I want to know the exact timing for their attack," Maria ordered. "Morrison, establish an overwatch position on that ridge. If this goes wrong, you'll need to radio our position to any friendly forces in the area." "Captain, I should be going in with you," Morrison protested. "Jake, someone needs to survive to report what happened here. If we don't make it out, you're the only one who can tell command about the nuclear threat and ensure they adapt their evacuation strategy." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, Maria's team prepared for what might be their final mission. Each soldier checked his equipment one last time, knowing that success or failure would determine the fate of hundreds of their fellow soldiers. The enemy communications that Williams monitored revealed the attack timeline. The nuclear device would be fired at 2300 hours, targeting the main evacuation convoy as it passed through a narrow valley 20 kilometers to the west. The convoy was scheduled to reach that point at exactly the same time, suggesting that the enemy had detailed intelligence about American evacuation plans. "Captain, based on the radio traffic, it sounds like they're planning to detonate the device at an altitude of 300 meters, Williams reported. "That would maximize the radiation exposure and thermal effects across the largest possible area." Maria felt sick thinking about the casualties such an attack would cause. The convoy included not just combat soldiers, but medical personnel, logistics specialists, and support staff. Many of them were young soldiers on their first deployment, following orders to evacuate what they believed was a routine repositioning operation. As night fell, Maria's team moved into position for their assault on the enemy compound. They had identified 3 objectives: disable the nuclear launcher, eliminate the command structure coordinating the attack, and destroy any backup nuclear devices that might be present. Rodriguez and Chen would approach the launcher from the drainage canal, plant explosives to disable its mobility systems, and attempt to neutralize any personnel guarding the weapon. Maria and Williams would assault the command bunker to eliminate the attack coordination and gather intelligence on any additional nuclear threats. Morrison would remain in overwatch position to provide sniper support and serve as a relay for emergency communications. If the mission failed, he would have less than 3 hours to warn the convoy before it entered the target zone. As they prepared to begin the assault, Maria gathered her team for a final briefing. Looking at each of these men who had chosen to risk everything for their fellow soldiers, she felt a profound sense of honor and responsibility. "Gentlemen, we're about to attempt something that will either save hundreds of American lives or cost us our own. Either way, we're doing our duty as soldiers and as human beings. Whatever happens, I'm proud to serve with each of you." The assault began at 21:30 hours, 90 minutes before the enemy's planned nuclear attack. Rodriguez and Chen disappeared into the drainage canal while Maria and Williams approached the command bunker from the opposite direction. Morrison settled into his sniper position with a clear view of the entire compound. What none of them anticipated was the extent to which the enemy had prepared for exactly this type of assault. As Maria and Williams approached the command bunker, they triggered a motion detector that immediately alerted the entire compound to their presence. Floodlights illuminated the area, and automatic weapons fire began impacting around their position. The mission had been compromised before it had truly begun, but Maria's team was committed now. There was no retreat, no alternative plan, and no possibility of calling for backup. They would either prevent the nuclear attack in the next 90 minutes, or hundreds of American soldiers would die in the most devastating attack in the history of the conflict. As enemy fire erupted around them, Maria realized that their only chance of success lay in the one advantage they still possessed. The enemy didn't know that they knew about the nuclear weapon. If they could maintain the element of surprise regarding their true objective, they might still be able to complete their mission. "All units, this is Bravo 6, Maria radioed to her team. Execute primary objective. Time is critical. The final phase of their desperate mission had begun. Under the harsh glare of enemy floodlights, Maria Santos and her team found themselves in the fight of their lives. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions around the compound as enemy soldiers responded to the intrusion alarm. Maria and Williams dove for cover behind a concrete barrier, while Rodriguez and Chen pressed forward through the drainage canal toward their objective. Morrison's voice crackled through their radio headsets from his overwatch position. Bravo 6. I count 20 enemy personnel converging on your position. You've got machine gun nests at 2 and 10 o'clock, approximately 50 meters out. Maria peered around the concrete barrier and saw the nuclear launcher, now clearly visible under the floodlights. It was indeed a mobile platform, mounted on a heavy truck chassis with the missile already loaded and apparently ready for firing. Enemy soldiers were rushing to defensive positions around the weapon, but none seemed to be preparing for immediate launch. Williams, we need to reach that command bunker, Maria shouted over the gunfire. If we can disrupt their command structure, it might buy Rodriguez and Chen the time they need. The medic nodded and checked his weapon. Williams had trained as a combat medic, but his marksmanship skills were exceptional. He had saved Maria's life on more than one occasion during previous missions. Captain, I'll provide covering fire. Move when I engage the machine gun position at 2 o'clock, Williams replied. As Williams opened fire on the enemy position, Maria sprinted toward the command bunker. Enemy bullets impacted the ground around her feet, but her years of combat experience had taught her how to move under fire. She reached the bunker entrance just as an enemy soldier emerged to investigate the attack. The close-quarters combat was brutal and swift. Maria's training took over as she engaged the enemy soldier hand-to-hand, ultimately securing access to the bunker. Inside, she found sophisticated communication equipment and what appeared to be the firing controls for the nuclear launcher. The equipment was more advanced than she had expected, with computer displays showing targeting coordinates and countdown timers. According to the digital readout, the nuclear device was scheduled to fire in exactly 73 minutes. The targeting coordinates matched the location where the American convoy would be most vulnerable. Maria immediately began photographing the equipment and downloading data from the computer systems. Even if their mission failed, this intelligence would prove crucial for preventing future nuclear attacks. As she worked, she could hear Williams engaging enemy forces outside the bunker. Meanwhile, Rodriguez and Chen had reached the nuclear launcher through the drainage canal. The approach had been successful, allowing them to get within 20 meters of the weapon without detection. But now that the alarm had been triggered, enemy soldiers were taking defensive positions around the launcher. Chen, we've got multiple hostiles between us and the target, Rodriguez whispered into his radio. How close do you need to get to place the charges? Ideally within 10 meters of the launcher's base. I need to target the hydraulic systems and the mobility platform, Chen replied, studying the weapon through his night vision scope. Rodriguez could see at least 6 enemy soldiers positioned around the launcher, with more arriving from other parts of the compound. A direct assault would be suicide, but they had one advantage. The enemy still didn't realize that the nuclear launcher was their primary target. Chen, what if we create a diversion, make them think we're after something else? Chen considered the suggestion. Near the launcher was a fuel depot containing diesel and aviation fuel for the various vehicles in the compound. An explosion there would certainly draw enemy attention and might provide the confusion needed to reach the nuclear weapon. Rodriguez, if I can get to that fuel depot and set a delayed charge, it'll create enough chaos for you to reach the launcher, but the timing has to be perfect. How long do you need? Give me 5 minutes to set the charge, then another 2 minutes to reach the launcher. When the fuel depot explodes, you'll have maybe 30 seconds while they're confused and repositioning. Rodriguez checked his watch. 68 minutes until the nuclear launch. Every second counted. But the plan was their best option for disabling the weapon. Chen moved through the darkness toward the fuel depot while Rodriguez maintained position near the launcher. The young explosives expert had trained for exactly this type of mission, but the reality of working under such extreme pressure while enemy soldiers searched for him was more challenging than any training exercise. As Chen placed his explosives at the fuel depot, he noticed additional intelligence that changed their understanding of the threat. Several large containers near the depot were marked with radiation warning symbols. These weren't just conventional fuel supplies. The enemy had stockpiled additional nuclear materials at this location. "Rodriguez, we've got a bigger problem," Chen whispered into his radio. "They've got multiple nuclear devices here. This isn't just one tactical nuke, it's an entire nuclear weapons stockpile." The implications were staggering. If the enemy had multiple nuclear weapons, the threat extended far beyond the evacuation convoy. They could target American bases throughout the region, potentially killing thousands of soldiers and civilians. Back at the command bunker, Maria had discovered confirmation of Chen's intelligence. The computer systems showed targeting data for 6 separate nuclear strikes scheduled at intervals over the next 12 hours. The evacuation convoy was just the first target in a coordinated nuclear assault on American forces. "Williams, we've got multiple nuclear weapons here," Maria reported over the radio. "This is bigger than we thought. They're planning a sustained nuclear assault." Williams had taken defensive positions outside the bunker, engaging enemy forces that were trying to retake their command center. His medical training had given him a steady hand under pressure, and his accurate fire was keeping the enemy at bay. "Captain, Morrison reports that the convoy is maintaining its schedule. They'll be in the target zone in 62 minutes, Williams replied. Maria realized that even if they disabled the first nuclear launcher, there might be backup weapons positioned elsewhere. She needed to find the master control system for all the nuclear devices and shut down the entire operation. The computer systems in the bunker were more sophisticated than typical military equipment, suggesting that the enemy had received technical assistance from an advanced foreign power. The interface was partially in English, indicating that the system had been designed for operators with limited technical training. As Maria worked to understand the control system, she discovered a disturbing fact. The nuclear weapons were equipped with dead man switches. If the command bunker lost power or was destroyed, the weapons would automatically fire at their programmed targets. The enemy had designed the system to ensure that their nuclear assault would succeed even if their command structure was eliminated. "Rodriguez, Chen, abort the assault on the launcher," Maria ordered over the radio. "The weapons have dead man switches. If we destroy the command system, they'll fire automatically." But it was too late. Chen's diversionary explosion at the fuel depot erupted in a massive fireball that illuminated the entire compound. The blast was much larger than expected due to the nuclear material stored nearby, and the explosion created chaos throughout the enemy position. Rodriguez used the confusion to reach the nuclear launcher, but as he prepared to place his explosive charges, enemy soldiers spotted him. A fierce firefight erupted around the weapon, with Rodriguez fighting desperately to complete his mission while under heavy fire. Morrison's sniper fire from the overwatch position was keeping some of the enemy soldiers pinned down, but more were arriving from other parts of the compound. The situation was rapidly becoming unsustainable for Maria's small team. "Captain, we're running out of time and ammunition," Rodriguez reported over the radio. "I can disable this launcher, but there might be others we haven't found." Maria studied the computer system more carefully, looking for a way to safely shut down all the nuclear weapons without triggering the automatic firing sequence. The system was complex, but she noticed that it required continuous authentication codes to maintain the launch sequence. "Williams, I need you to help me reprogram this system," Maria called out. "If we can change the authentication codes, we might be able to delay the launch sequence long enough to evacuate the convoy." Williams fought his way into the bunker just as Maria discovered the authentication protocol. The system required biometric confirmation from the enemy commander every 30 minutes to maintain the launch sequence. If they could prevent that authentication, the system would enter a safety lockdown mode. "Captain, where's their commander?" Williams asked. Maria checked the compound layout on the computer system. According to the personnel tracking display, the enemy commander was located in a secondary bunker approximately 100 meters from their current position. But reaching that bunker would require fighting through the heaviest concentration of enemy forces. "Rodriguez, Chen, converge on my position," Maria ordered. "We're going after their commander." As her team regrouped at the command bunker, Maria quickly briefed them on the authentication system and the location of the enemy commander. They had 47 minutes before the nuclear launch, and they needed to either capture or eliminate the enemy commander to prevent the authentication sequence. The assault on the secondary bunker was the most dangerous action Maria's team had ever attempted. They were outnumbered 5-1, running low on ammunition and operating in enemy territory without any possibility of backup or extraction. But they had one crucial advantage. The enemy still didn't understand their true objective. Most of the enemy forces were focused on protecting the nuclear launchers, not the command personnel who controlled them. Maria led her team in a flanking maneuver that took them around the heaviest enemy positions. Chen used his remaining explosives to create diversions that drew enemy forces away from their objective, while Rodriguez and Williams provided covering fire. The final assault on the secondary bunker required close-quarters combat skills that Maria had learned over years of dangerous missions. The enemy commander was a professional soldier with advanced training, but he was unprepared for the determination and skill of Maria's team. After a brief but intense firefight, Maria's team secured the secondary bunker and captured the enemy commander alive. More importantly, they gained access to the master control system for all the nuclear weapons in the compound. With 31 minutes remaining until the scheduled nuclear launch, Maria used the captured commander's biometric data to access the authentication system. The process was more complex than she had anticipated, requiring multiple levels of security clearance and confirmation codes. "Williams, can you patch into their communication system and contact the convoy?" Maria asked as she worked to shut down the nuclear weapons. Williams quickly connected his portable radio to the enemy communication equipment, broadcasting on multiple military frequencies simultaneously. "Any American units, this is Bravo 6. Nuclear strike imminent on evacuation route. Repeat, nuclear strike imminent. Divert immediately to alternate routes." The response came from the convoy commander himself, Colonel Peterson. "Bravo 6, this is Eagle 1. Confirm nuclear threat. We're 20 minutes out from the target zone." "Eagle 1, confirmed nuclear threat. Multiple devices targeting evacuation routes. Divert to emergency route Charlie immediately," Williams responded. As the convoy changed course to avoid the nuclear strike zone, Maria continued working to shut down the weapon systems. The authentication process was taking longer than expected, and she could see that some of the nuclear devices were beginning their pre-launch sequences. "Chen, I need you to physically disable the backup launchers while I work on the main system," Maria ordered. Chen immediately understood the implications. Disabling the backup launchers would require him to approach active nuclear weapons that could detonate at any moment. But without his intervention, the weapons would fire automatically when the authentication system failed. "Rodriguez, Morrison, provide covering fire for Chen," Maria commanded. "Williams, maintain communication with the convoy and make sure they stay clear of all potential target zones." As Chen moved to disable the backup nuclear devices, Maria finally succeeded in accessing the master control system. The interface showed 6 nuclear weapons in various stages of preparation, with launch times staggered over the next 8 hours. The shutdown process was more complex than simply turning off the weapons. Each device required individual authentication to enter safe mode, and the system was designed to resist tampering. Maria had to convince the computer that she was an authorized operator executing a legitimate stand-down order. With 18 minutes remaining until the first scheduled launch, Maria managed to shut down 4 of the 6 nuclear weapons. The remaining 2 devices were the most dangerous, as they were already in advanced launch preparation, and the safety protocols were more difficult to override. Chen reached the first backup launcher just as it began its final pre-launch sequence. The nuclear device was mounted on a mobile platform similar to the one Rodriguez had targeted earlier, but this weapon was more advanced and heavily protected. Enemy soldiers were still fighting desperately to protect their nuclear weapons, but Maria's team had gained the tactical advantage through superior training and determination. Morrison's sniper fire was eliminating key enemy personnel, while Rodriguez provided close support for Chen's dangerous work with the nuclear devices. "Captain, I've disabled the mobility system on this launcher, but the nuclear device is still active," Chen reported. "I need more time to safely shut it down." Maria looked at the countdown timer. 12 minutes until launch. She had managed to delay 4 of the 6 weapons, but the 2 most dangerous devices were still operational. Even worse, the enemy commander had regained consciousness and was trying to override her shutdown commands. "Williams, we need to move the commander away from the control systems," Maria ordered. As Williams secured the enemy commander, Maria made a desperate attempt to complete the shutdown sequence for the remaining nuclear weapons. The computer system was fighting her commands, designed to prevent exactly the type of interference she was attempting. With 7 minutes remaining, Maria realized that she might not be able to shut down both remaining weapons through the computer system. One of the devices would require manual intervention to prevent its launch. "Chen, which weapon can you disable manually?" Maria called over the radio. "Captain, I can cut the firing circuits on the closer launcher, but I'll need to stay with it to prevent automatic reactivation. The other device is too well protected for manual intervention." Maria understood the implications. Chen would have to remain next to an active nuclear weapon to prevent its launch, knowing that if anything went wrong, he would be vaporized instantly. It was the ultimate sacrifice, staying with a nuclear bomb to protect thousands of fellow soldiers. "Chen, you don't have to do this," Maria said over the radio. "Captain, I joined the military to protect American soldiers." "This is what I trained for," Chen replied with calm determination. As Chen worked to disable the final nuclear launcher, Maria succeeded in shutting down the 5th weapon through the computer system. Only one nuclear device remained active, the one that Chen was manually disabling. With 3 minutes until launch, Chen reported that he had successfully cut the primary firing circuits, but the weapon had backup systems that were designed to activate if the primary circuits were damaged. "Captain, the backup firing system is activating. I can stop it, but I'll need to stay here to prevent reactivation," Chen reported. Maria realized that Chen was volunteering to remain with the nuclear weapon indefinitely, ensuring that it could never be used against American forces. It was a heroic decision that would save thousands of lives, but it would also mean that Chen could never leave his position safely. "Chen, we'll find another way," Maria protested. "Captain, there is no other way. This is my choice, and it's the right choice." As the launch countdown reached 0, the nuclear weapon that Chen was protecting remained silent. His intervention had successfully prevented the most devastating attack in the history of the conflict. But the cost was enormous. Chen would have to remain at his position to monitor the disabled weapon, potentially for the rest of his life. Maria's team had succeeded in preventing the nuclear assault, but their victory came with a price that none of them had anticipated. As enemy forces throughout the compound began surrendering or retreating, Maria realized that their unauthorized mission had prevented a catastrophe that could have changed the entire course of the war. Over the following hours, American forces arrived to secure the compound and safely dispose of the nuclear weapons. General Patterson himself flew in to debrief Maria and her team, bringing with him a mixture of relief, gratitude, and concern about their unauthorized actions. "Captain Santos, your actions prevented the deaths of hundreds, possibly thousands of American soldiers," General Patterson said as they stood in the secured compound. But you also directly disobeyed orders and conducted an unauthorized military operation. General, I accept full responsibility for our actions. My men were following my orders, Maria replied. Captain, because of the extraordinary circumstances and the lives you saved, there will be no disciplinary action. In fact, you and your team are being recommended for the highest military honors. But for Maria, the greatest honor was knowing that the evacuation convoy had reached safety and that Chen's sacrifice had prevented a nuclear catastrophe. Her team had proven that sometimes the most important battles are fought not because of orders, but because of conscience and duty to fellow soldiers. The official reports would record that Captain Maria Santos and her team had discovered and neutralized a major nuclear threat through exceptional courage and tactical skill. But Maria would always remember this mission as a reminder that sometimes the hardest decision a soldier can make is choosing between following orders and doing what's right. Years later, when military historians studied the operation, they would describe it as one of the most successful counter-nuclear missions in military history. But for the soldiers whose lives were saved by Maria's decision to disobey orders, it would always be remembered as the night when 5 soldiers proved that courage and conscience could triumph over overwhelming odds. Chen's sacrifice became a symbol of military valor, and he eventually became one of the most decorated soldiers in military history. His willingness to stay with a nuclear weapon to protect his fellow soldiers embodied the highest ideals of military service. Maria Santos returned to active duty with a renewed understanding of leadership and the weight of command decisions. Her experience taught her that sometimes the most important orders are the ones that come from conscience rather than command, and that true military leadership requires the courage to make difficult decisions even when they carry personal consequences. The nuclear weapons compound was eventually converted into a memorial for the soldiers who had died in the conflict, with a special monument dedicated to the courage of those who risked everything to protect their fellow soldiers. Maria often visited the memorial, remembering not just the victory they had achieved, but the price that had been paid for it. The story of Captain Maria Santos and her team became legendary within military circles, taught at academies as an example of how individual courage and initiative could change the course of history. But for Maria, the true lesson was simpler. Sometimes the most important battles are not fought for victory or glory, but for the simple principle that soldiers never abandon their fellow soldiers, no matter what orders they receive.